How much better did your favorite NFL team get this off season? Welcome, football fans, to a new tier ranking video on the BLV. In this video, I rank every NFL team's offseason from the absolute most disgusting effort to improve an NFL team to the most impressive work of art in roster building that we may have ever seen. If that sounds good, you know what to do. Gronk, spike the like button. If you're not a jabroni, subscribe, man. Let's go. Let's do some tiers for every NFL team and their off-season success. So, when looking at the tier maker, we have our tiers set up from monumental, a life-changing, franchise-altering offseason, to what the fudge was that? These are the tiers. In between, we have watch out. This team definitely got better. This team improved, and I'm impressed. Step forward, self-explanatory. They got a little bit better, but how much? Time will tell is pretty much, I don't really know yet. Some of their moves were good. Some of their moves were bad. I kind of understand the process, but I'm not exactly sure if they're better or worse. The same is this team is the same, pretty much. And regression means I definitely think this team got worse. I'm just not sure if they were an absolute disaster class. So now that we understand the tiers, and you jabronis have Gronk spiked the like button, let's get to it. So let's begin with the New Orleans Saints. And guys, I'm going straight off the top of my head. So if I forget like a move or two, forgive me, please. Okay? Don't be commenting about the 7th linebacker that a team signed who's not even going to make the team, okay? I'm trying to give you the outline and the overview of what actually took place for this football team. So, the New Orleans Saints. Okay. First of all, I don't know if Derek Carr is actually playing for this team this year. That was an event that actually took place for this team. If he's playing, I believe that the team will be about the same, realistically speaking. But overall, the vibes for this football team, despite bringing in a new head coach in Kellen Moore, a new regime from a coaching perspective, I would say the Saints have sour vibes just because they feel like a sour team. I like the Calvin Banks first round pick. I appreciate the bold risk of Tyler Shuck in the second round to be the future franchise quarterback and maybe even this year's starting quarterback. And I am a bigger Shuck fan than a majority of people that evaluated the quarterback position. He was my second favorite quarterback in the draft. So I actually do like that pick. At wide receiver, they did bring back Brandon Cooks. I do like that just for the leadership of the team. They, for some reason, decided to re-sign Jawan Johnson, although I like that player. It just felt like, why? I don't know. Alvin Kamara still doesn't really have a running mate. I do believe they did draft Neal in the draft, but I'm not exactly sure how monumental that will be. So, offensively, assuming that they have health, I mean, yeah, the team will be better on paper. I don't know who's playing quarterback, though, so it's kind of hard to say. They didn't really do much to actually alter this side of the ball from a roster construction standpoint, outside of really picking up Calvin Banks in the draft, who should play left tackle, which moves Fuaga to the right and moves Penning to guard. Now, defensively, they decided to re-sign Chase Young, which is never a good financial decision. Justin Reed, for some reason, was their target in free agency, despite being a player that doesn't really fit their timeline. He's a guy that's won multiple Super Bowls and honestly was just looking to get paid, and the Saints happened to be the team that wanted to pay him. He's a very good player. I give them credit for that, but they did lose Paulson Adebo, which would have made more sense because he's younger and he's a very good corner, and their corner position is arguably the worst in the entire NFL right now. And their defensive front still really hasn't changed in any way, shape, or form. They didn't really put a lot into the draft when it came to defense. So I will say that their defense on paper from last year's beginning to this year's, and then also accounting for coaching, I think is much worse. So overall, I would say the Saints regressed. And honestly, I don't even really know if their moves made a lot of sense. So you could argue WTF, bro. But honestly, I just don't know what's going on with Derek Carr. So I'm just going to put them in the regression category candidate right there. Then we have the Miami Dolphins. Miami Dolphins absolutely suck. My goodness, this team is awful. Now, we look at what they did this offseason. Tua Tagovailoa hopefully took some more MMA lessons, some jiu-jitsu lessons to protect his noggin. Hopefully that has been taking place. The offensive line, Armstead retired. That absolutely blows. Okay, so that's a big loss. Now, they did try to address their offensive line with their second-round pick, and my man, Wide Jonah, if you know, you know. At the tight end position, they still have Jonnu. At running back, they did lose a couple depth pieces, including Raheem Mostert, but I'm not too concerned because he didn't play too much. Wide receiver, Tyreek Hill wants to get traded, then he doesn't want to get traded, then he wants to get traded, then he wants to have another baby, and then he doesn't want to get traded, so I don't think he's going to get traded. I think they brought in another wide receiver, and that name right now is Nick Westbrook-Akine. I thought I was going to forget, but I didn't yet, guys. So the offense, I would say, did get worse because the offensive line does not have a legitimate left tackle any longer, which is going to be a big loss. But I like their draft pick to improve the interior. Tyreek Hill, I don't know what's going on with that guy. And honestly, the vibes are really down for this team just from that perspective, on top of Jalen Ramsey's perspective, where he wants to get traded. He's seeing the writing on the wall. He's seeing and reading between the lines, and he's kind of sensing this team is falling apart. So he wants to get traded, and that's likely going to happen. So I'm including that in my decision here. Defensively, they did lose Calais Campbell, which is another concern because you would have thought he would still return to Miami after the fun he had last year, and he is from Miami, the university, right? The U. Then you look at the safety position where they lost Javon Holland, one of the best young safeties in football. They also lost a corner in Fuller, who I don't even think has signed anywhere yet. Their safety position is pretty bad. Their corner position is pretty bad. Their linebacker position is solid. Their edge position is injured, but pretty darn good. Their interior defensive line, they did add Kenneth Grant to replace Calais Campbell. So I like, what they were able to do to replace some pieces, but I don't really see how they got any better. I definitely think they're worse. And honestly, I think just from the account of this team feels like they're off the rails. They feel like they're falling apart. They feel like a team that doesn't have good vibes at all. They could just absolutely, everybody could get fired. The house is burning. Honestly, I'm going to put WTF for Miami because I think that from a culture perspective, they are falling apart. The Baltimore Ravens, this is interesting because, they were arguably the most talented team in the NFL last year outside of Philadelphia, so it's kind of hard to say that they got a lot better, but let's walk through it. So they did lose Makari on the offensive line, but it's not a huge loss, so that's, I guess, a decrease. You look at running back, it's the same. Derrick Henry got a little older, but that's not really included in this evaluation. Zay Flowers is back from his injury that he missed the Buffalo Bills game, which people forget. But that doesn't really matter. They did add DeAndre Hopkins. Rashad Bateman is still there. Okay. Tight end, Mark Andrews a little older, but again, that doesn't matter. They're the same there. So offensively, they're basically the same. Can Lamar Jackson continue to play like an MVP? We will see. The one big thing I'll say about their offense, they kept Todd Monken, which I didn't think would be possible. Defensively, I think that just inherently they're going to grow and be better because they have a second-year coordinator instead of a rookie young coordinator. But that being said, that's not an off-season thing. Defensive line-wise, they're basically the same, except they did add Mike Green in the draft to the edge position, which is a huge improvement because that guy can rush the quarterback as long as he has his head on straight and is not going after people. Also, you have the linebacker position. They did add some depth in the draft. The safety position, they did add Malachi Starks in the draft, so that's an improvement in my opinion for sure. They have 3 safeties now that I like and I trust. The corner position, they also added Chidobe Awuzie, which adds a layer of depth, and honestly, if he's healthy, he might be better than Brandon Stevens. So I would actually say that the Ravens took a step forward. That might be crazy to say, but I think they are pretty much the same on offense. I think their defensive personnel did improve. And they did add DeAndre Hopkins. So they added a little bit more depth in a lot of areas. I think this team is a Super Bowl team this year, arguably. The Cincinnati Bengals are up next. Now, I just think from like a luck perspective, they honestly can't be worse than last year, and their defense can't be any more terrible or disgusting to watch, I hope. That being said, that's not an offseason thing. They did flip their defensive coordinator from Big Game Lou Anarumo, to the coordinator at Notre Dame, who, is it Golden? His name is slipping my mind for some reason. But regardless, they have a new defensive coordinator. Their defensive line, I like what they did with TJ Slayton from the Packers. I think Shamar Stewart has super upside. That being said, Sam Hubbard retired, which was kind of odd. But overall, the defensive front is basically the same, except I think it's got more upside because Shamar Stewart enters the fold and Trey Hendrickson, I think, will stay there. So I would actually argue that their defensive front might be a little bit better because Stewart might actually be better than Hubbard, and Slayton really helps them in a spot where like they didn't have a big nose tackle defender to stop the run. So I think that's important. Linebacker, Jermaine Pratt may or may not be on the team. Regardless, they did add a bunch of depth with a second-round pick on top of a Oren Burks, who started in the Super Bowl for the Super Bowl champs. So I think their linebacker position is better, plus Logan Wilson is healthy. Safety is just healthier and maybe a little bit better in this system, but who knows? It didn't really get better. Cornerback, healthier again with Turner especially. That should help a lot. But then, I mean, they didn't really improve it yet. So there's still moves to be made potentially in June, July, and August for this team. But the overall main improvement here, I don't really see much outside of, I think the defensive front did get a little bit better for Cincinnati. We'll see if the scheme change really does anything. Offensively, I think the best thing you can say is that they stayed the same because they were one of the most dynamic, explosive offenses in football. And in my opinion, my most fun watching an offense last year. So I'm happy about that. I think that their running back position is probably a hint better just due to depth. Their offensive line is pretty much the same, but they did help their guard position in the draft. And I love that they kept Mike Gesicki. I love their receivers. T. Higgins and Jamar are both back. I think Cincinnati probably, this is tough. I don't really know where to put them. I want to say they took a slight step forward. I don't think you can really argue that they regressed. They might be the same, but time will tell is an argument. I'm going to say a slight step forward. I'm going to be a little positive when it comes to Cincinnati. The Denver Broncos. Okay, so let's break this down. Coaching-wise, they're the same. They have one of the best offensive and defensive coaches in football with Sean Payton and Vance Joseph. He's having the time of his life because they signed Talanoa Hufanga, and they also signed Dre Greenlaw. That being said, Dre Greenlaw did get injured already, so that is not a good sign. But I love the pickup of Barron in the draft. That could actually be big-time impactful in their secondary. And really, when you're looking at their defense now, they have very few holes, and they added depth to the edge position in the draft as well. They really didn't lose anybody, so I think you could only say that they took a step forward defensively. Offensively, their offensive line is the same. The only issue would maybe be age for Garrett Bowles. Tight end, they got better with Evan Ingram without debate. Wide receiver, they maybe got better with the latest draft pick. I wish they would have signed somebody, but they didn't. Running back, I definitely think they got better with RJ Harvey in the draft. So I think everything points to the Broncos from a roster standpoint to taking a step forward. That being said, just because they improve their talent doesn't necessarily mean that they'll actually be a better team. But I hope so. The Giants are up next. I definitely think the Giants got a lot better. So now let's talk through this. Offensively, quarterback can't be any worse when you're starting Tommy DeVito, who's only starting in the NFL because of the mob. I think you're getting better, right? Drew Lock, as fun as he is, as great as his dance moves are, right? As fun as he is, Jameis Winston is even more fun, okay? So that's an upgrade in even swag, aura, all of it. Russell Wilson, he wins games despite being disgusting to watch, and they did draft Jackson Dart, so there is upside at this position that didn't exist with Daniel Jones. Running back, they did get a little better, in my opinion, with Cam Skattebo. So that's nice. Wide receiver, they're basically the same. They somehow re-signed Darius Slayton, which made no sense. Tight end, they're the same pretty much. Defensively, they didn't actually do anything to their coaching staff, which is also an interesting note. But defensively, they got a lot better. They signed Paulson Adebo at corner. At safety, Javon Holland. At linebacker, they're the same, I think. Defensive line-wise, they added Alexander in the draft beside Dexter Lawrence, and they got Abdul Carter, who is an absolute stud. He's so good that he asked Lawrence Taylor for his jersey number, and I'm glad that he didn't give it to him. That being said, the Giants definitely got a lot better, and based on their offseason improvement, I would say watch out, because this is a team that may have quickly turned the corner in terms of improving their overall franchise. If I was truly sold on Jackson Dart being an absolute stud, I would probably put them in monumental, but I don't exactly believe that to be the case. That being said, though, Jameis Winston will make them a lot more entertaining if he hits the field, and their defense is going to be a lot better. The Vikings are up next. The Vikings, I think, from a roster standpoint, got better. You could maybe argue that their quarterback position got a little worse if you think that J.J. McCarthy will have year 2 rookie struggles because he didn't actually play as a rookie. Sam Darnold left, J.J. in. That is maybe the only area where they actually got worse. When you look at their offensive line, this is the area where they got a lot better. Donovan Jackson in the first round, I think, will be a very good NFL guard. Will Fries at the opposite guard from the Colts, and center Ryan Kelly, also from the Colts. So they improved their offensive line to being, in my opinion, a top 10 unit in the NFL without debate in terms of talent. Tight end is the same, I believe. Wide receiver, they did add a 3rd-round pick to that position for competition for Jalen Naylor, but that's marginal. Running back, they added Jordan Mason to Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones might regress as a player, but I don't know that to be a fact. Defensively, Brian Flores stays. That's a big deal. I mean, he could have easily left for a job. Safety is pretty much the same. They did lose one of their safeties, Bynum, I think, to the Colts. Cornerback, they didn't re-sign Gilmore yet. He walked. They did sign the guy from the Eagles. What's his name, bro? He was the 4th corner on the Eagles. You guys know who I'm talking about. I can't remember his name. Rodgers. Isaiah Rodgers. That's his name. Byron Murphy re-signed somehow. I don't know how another team didn't vulture him up. And I guess they could have gotten a little bit better at corner, but they didn't. Edge position is basically the same. I mean, you would expect improvement from Dallas Turner, but he was already on the roster. Defensive line-wise, they got a lot better with Jonathan Allen and Javon Hargrave. So, yeah, I pretty much said they got better in a lot of areas. I don't know if quarterback got better, though, so that's a question. Time will tell is maybe an argument here, but I think when you look at it from a roster perspective, their improvement on the line of scrimmage is substantial enough for me to at least say step forward. And if J.J. McCarthy is the real deal Holyfield, this could be watch out, because they could be like a team that really, really, really is good this year. So I would put them in a step forward. Los Angeles Rams. So Stafford remains after skiing with Tom Brady. Running back, they did add somebody in the draft. Can't recall who. Wide receiver, Devontae Adams replaces Cooper Kupp, which I think is an improvement overall. They retained Tutu Atwell. Tight end position they added with their top pick in the draft in the 2nd round after getting a future first from Atlanta, those jabronis. Terrence Ferguson. who's very athletic and I think will help Tyler Higbee at that position. Offensive line, they kept their left tackle, but they didn't really improve anything. So offensively, I would say they got a bit better because they added an athletic tight end and they added Davante Adams. Defensively, they haven't really done much to improve. I can't really say that they did a ton. I mean, safety is the same. Corner is the same. They did add Poona Ford to their run defense, so I guess that's a marginal improvement. I can't really say that they got like so much better for me to say that it's a monumental or a watch out type of offseason. The only thing I could argue is that watch out would mean that Davante Adams is so much better than Cooper Kupp that they are like a Super Bowl team now. But I would argue that they took a step forward. I think that's fair. We got a lot of teams in the step forward category. It's getting kind of scary. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers are up next. Now, this one is interesting because they did have coaching changes for the negative. They lost Liam Cohen, who, in my opinion, was one of the best play callers in football without debate last year, and kind of aided Baker Mayfield to his best season of his career and helped them mask the deficiencies of their injuries at wide receiver. So that is an L. I think, despite really not changing anything about their offensive personnel, running backs are the same. Probably like the best trio of running backs in the NFL when you include Sean Tucker in the mix. And then you have at wide receiver, they did add a Mecca Abuka from Ohio State, which obviously helps. But I mean, he's like the third or fourth receiver, so we'll see. But it obviously helps. I just think the coordinator loss is the biggest deal here. So I would argue that their offense got a little worse, actually. Their offensive line is the same. Defensively, they got better, I think. They added a couple cornerbacks with Emerson and Parrish, both guys I liked in the draft, and that will add a layer of depth to a position where they have a lot of injuries frequently watching this team. Safety, I think they got better just by the movement of their corner position to their safety position, if that makes sense. Like they could move some of their corners from the nickel to the safety position, but I don't know if that's really like a thing. I don't know if I can really say that's a bonus point. Linebacker, I would argue that they stayed the same. I mean, Anthony Walker might be a little bit better than Britt, I guess, at least as a coverage player, but I can't really say that's substantial enough for me to say it's improved. I would say that Hassan Reddick does improve their edge position along with 2 draft picks to include their depth. And their defensive line is already very good. And they didn't really improve that area. I would say that Tampa Bay probably stayed the same. A time will tell is a fair one as well. I would say stay the same though. I mean, I'm not including that Chris Godwin's returning from injury because he was on the team at the beginning of last year. So if you want to include that, I mean, you can include that if you want. But I'm just going to say they're the same, which is probably still the best team in their division. The Detroit Lions are up next. Now, the Lions had a bunch of injuries at the end of last year, but again, is that really an offseason improvement? I mean, I don't know. They did lose a lot of coaches. A lot. I mean, so many, I can't even think of how many they lost. I mean, they lost their defensive line coach. They lost their offensive coordinator, the defensive coordinator. They lost a lot, okay? The guys on offense, I mean, like the Patriots defensive coordinator was the Lions defensive line coach. The Jets offensive coordinator was one of the Lions offensive coaches. So Dan Campbell has been left out to dry over there in Detroit. So that is a really concerning part of Detroit's offseason. Seriously concerning. They replaced Kevin Zeitler, probably the best guard in free agency, or at least like one of them. I guess if you include the Chiefs kid, but Trey Smith. But I guess like maybe last year Zeitler was even better. So, I mean, Zeitler was awesome last year. So they did replace him with a rookie, which probably is not good for now, but I think it's good for the future. That doesn't necessarily help them now. I mean, the rest, wide receiver, they added Tesla, who probably won't play. Other than that, they basically just resigned Tim Patrick, if I'm not mistaken. Tight end is the same. Running back is the same. Quarterback is the same. So offensively, the only thing I can really say is they probably got worse because they went from Zeitler to a rookie, and they went from Ben Johnson to an unknown. Defensively, they got better due to health. But again, I don't know if they got better due to personnel because they lost Carlton Davis for DJ Reed, which I think is a slight downgrade, but I think some people would say it's the same. Safety, I think, is the same. They have very good safeties. Cornerback, they did just continue to improve the depth of that position, which is fine. Linebackers were already very good. Defensive tackles, they actually added a first-round pick to an already strong position, which I didn't really understand, but it is what it is. Edge position, they just re-signed Marcus Davenport, who got hurt again last year. The edge position, they did lose Zadarius Smith. Okay, that's something. They haven't lost him yet. They could re-sign him. Detroit, I would actually argue they got worse just because of the coaching. So I have to put them there. Despite the personnel, probably getting better if you include the health of the players. But I'm not really doing that. So I'd say regression. The Bears definitely got better. Now, I think this could be monumental. So I'm gonna put it in monumental. We'll think through it and we'll see if we have to adjust it. But I think monumental being that Ben Johnson could be a monumental hire as a head coach. I mean, regardless, whether it's positive or negatively monumental, it's gonna be monumental. But we're talking positive here. Ben Johnson's a wizard with the play call sheet, and I think he will be successful. Caleb Williams is the biggest question. That being said, even if Caleb Williams fails and falls on his face, I think Ben Johnson could be so good that they could flip another quarterback and get somebody in there and still have a very strong roster. You look what they were able to do. I mean, offensive line-wise, you get Drew Dahlman, who's one of the 10 best centers from Atlanta. You get Joe Thuney, who's arguably the best guard in the entire NFL. You get Jonah Jackson, who's very solid and played in his scheme before. I wish they did more at running back, but it is what it is. They only really added like a 7th round pick out of Rutgers. They did improve at tackle because they added a 2nd round pick there in Ozzie out of Boston College. Tight end, they improved because they added Colson Loveland. Wide receiver, they probably got worse from Keenan Allen to Luther Burden, and they added Zacchaeus as well. But I would say that's slightly worse just because of the unproven factor. But I would also say that Rome will get better probably, but that's not included in this, okay? Defensively, I think that their edge position got slightly better with the Colts signing there. Defensive tackle, I think they got better because they added Turner and they added Grady Jarrett. So I definitely see the improvement there. And then linebackers the same, safety's the same, corner is basically the same. So I would say that the Bears, just based on offensive line, total rework and retool and distribution, offensive line, young playmakers like Loveland and Burden to be long-term with Caleb Williams, with Rome Odunze, and then defensively kind of like just shaping up what was already a good unit, then getting Dennis Allen on top of that. I think that's a monumental offseason. I think they could be a playoff team with that improvement. The 49ers, this is a really interesting one because based on free agency, I think you could only make an argument that they lost talent. But then after the draft, you look at their roster and you could actually see where they might be better than last year, just in terms of roster construction. I would also argue that they're probably just going to be better because they won't get hurt at a ridiculous rate, but that's not included again, just like Detroit. But offensively, I think they got better at quarterback because they added Mac Jones and they added Rourke, the Canadian kid. So I think quarterback's better. Running back, Jordan Mason left. They added Jordan James, who I'm a big fan of. So they went Jordan for Jordan there. I mean, McCaffrey will be healthy. So I don't know if that's really included, but I think they got better at running back, or not better, but the same, I would say. Wide receiver. Now, this is an interesting one because Debo was not good last year, but he's still Debo Samuel. They did add a kid in the draft, and they also signed Demarcus Robinson. And Brandon Ayuk is healthy. Now, that being said, again, Ayuk's injury is not accounted for here. So I would say that they maybe got a little worse, but not like from a talent perspective, not by a lot, because they're probably going to be better this year at wide receiver because Ayuk will be healthy. Ricky's in year 2. Jawan Jennings is there, and they have Demarcus Robinson. So they're probably going to be better, but based on the offseason and the talent, it may be a little worse. Then tight end, they got a little bit better. They signed a backup tight end who can block, which will help Kittle. And then defensively, this is interesting. I think they got better because Robert Saleh is there. I think Robert Saleh is going to improve this defense overnight because their biggest flaw as a defense has been their coaching. Despite losing some talented players like Dre Greenlaw and Talanoa Hufanga, both injured, by the way, barely played last year. So I don't know how big of a loss those guys are. But, despite losing talent like Charvarius Ward is probably the biggest guy that they lost who actually played for them last year. And even he had his own personal issues. Robert Saleh is such a good coach that he should help them. Defensive line-wise, Hargrave got injured last year. They lost him. Malik Collins, they lost him, who was up and down last year. Leonard Floyd was up and down and old last year. But they did, I think, improve like the youth, the speed, the strength of their defensive front. And they got better against the run for sure. Michael Williams, right? Then they added West, is it? They added the kid from Texas in the second round. So they got better on the defensive line. Did they also sign somebody on the defensive line? I could be wrong. I mean, I'm not sure. Linebacker, they did add a third round pick to Fred Warner and D Winters to help replace Dre Greenlaw. But again, Greenlaw only played like 2 games. Then safety, they did add Richie Grant and Pinnock from the Giants, which they had to replace Hufanga, but again, Hufanga didn't really play. The Niners are confusing because a lot of their guys didn't really play. Cornerback, they got a little worse, I would say, just because they lost Ward, but they did draft a slot corner, and they also picked up Trey Brown, I believe it is, from Seattle. So they also added DJ Humphries to the O-line. Aaron Banks left at left guard, which is probably an L. Their O-line might have gotten a little worse, but it was already bad last year. Not as bad as people think, but it was not great. The Niners, honestly, bro, this is probably a time will tell, because I think you can make an argument that they got worse from a name value perspective, a name brand perspective, when people talk about all the player names they lost, like Floyd, Collins, Hargrave, Ward, etc. But their coaching is better, and their youth and their energy and their vibe is up. And I think that youth will go a long way. So I actually think this is a time will tell. If the draft was a good draft, this could actually be a team that got like a lot better, because a lot of those defenders that were old last year didn't play up to the level of their names. The Eagles, I don't even know off the top of my head where I would put them. So let's go through it. Offensive line, they probably got worse because they lost the behemoth Becton. They did add some draft pick depth, but none of them are really going to play. Dallas Goedert might get traded, so you've got to factor that in a little bit, but I don't think so. We at least can't talk about that yet. Wide receivers exactly the same. Running back, I think they lost one of their backups, if I'm not mistaken, Gainwell, right, to the Steelers. But they signed A.J. Dillon, I think. So, I mean, I can't really say that's a downgrade. It might be an upgrade, maybe. So the offense, and Kellen Moore left. So I will say Kellen Moore leaving is a loss. So I would say that they got a little worse on offense just because of Kellen Moore. And we've seen Jalen Hurts with good coordinators and bad coordinators, and it's a drastically different player. Defensively, I think they got worse on the defensive front just because, Nakobe Dean is seriously injured. But I will say that Jahad Campbell is probably an upgrade at linebacker. So they got better at linebacker, but they got worse at defensive tackle because Milton Williams left, and he's an awesome player. Edge-wise, they lost Josh Sweat, who's been a starter for them for like 5 or 6 years. So they definitely got worse there. But they did add some depth like Uche and Ojulari to help kind of compensate. So at least it's not terrible, but they got a little bit worse for sure. Safety-wise, Makuba in for Gardner Johnson. Unproven entity in Makuba, as much as I like him. I think I would say they got worse. Cornerback-wise, they lost Darius Slay. Again, proven entity. They did add Adoree Jackson, though, which is a nice little replacement, but he's not as good as Slay. So I would say the Eagles definitely got worse, man. I can't lie. They did keep Fangio, which is big. I think like the Lions, they're still awesome. They just got a little bit worse. The Raiders are up next. I think just from a coaching standpoint, they got so much better. Pete Carroll actually knows how to coach an NFL game, unlike Antonio Pierce, who wears the headset, but I don't know if he says anything. Honestly, I've never seen him like put the headset down to his mouth. Chip Kelly is going to help their offense a lot, I think. He's a very smart, savvy, creative coordinator. Geno Smith is light years better than their quarterback position last year. Ashton Genty is what's more than light years better than their running back last year. Wide receiver is worse, I would say, because Devontae Adams is gone, and they added the guy in the second round, Besh, who I think will be nice as an NFL player, but I mean, he's not Devontae Adams. I'm sorry about that. So they got worse at wide receiver. They're the same at tight end. Offensive line, I think they got better because they did draft a couple pieces that I like in the draft in the mid rounds. They also added like guys like Alex Kappa to kind of help them out in depth purposes at the guard position. So I think offense is way better from a coordinator standpoint, a quarterback standpoint, a running back standpoint, an offensive line depth standpoint. The only area is wide receiver. Defensively, obviously they get Christian Wilkins back, but that's not really included. Defensive line-wise, they didn't really add anybody. Linebacker, I'd argue they got worse because they lost both their starters from last year, Spillane and Diablo. I would also say that Roberts and White are not anywhere close to Spillane. Then you look at cornerback position, they got worse. They lost Hobbs, they lost Jones. On paper, they got worse, but Porter could be a stud. Stokes could still do something, and they still got a couple of guys there that were there last year. Safety, they probably got worse because they lost Morig. So I think offensively got a lot better. Defense actually probably got a little worse in the back end, but the defensive front is healthier. So that will balance things out. I think the Raiders definitely, I can't say they didn't take a step forward. I mean, they definitely did. They're professional. The Packers now, Packers are interesting. Okay, so, I mean, they didn't really get worse anywhere, did they? Their coaching is the same. You've got Halfley entering year 2. Offensive line, Aaron Banks added to the mix. They added a second-round tackle, so their offensive line, if anything, is even better than last year, which it was phenomenal. Wide receiver, Watson's hurt, but I'm not going to include that. Golden is in, which is an improvement. Running back is basically the same. A.J. Dillon left, who cares? Defensively, so offensively, I could say they're better. Defensively, they lost Slayton, which I think hurts on the defensive line. And my mouse or something keeps twitching. I don't really understand why that keeps happening, guys. I'm sorry, but if that's happening. The Packers, though, defensively. Edge position, did they lose anybody? They got rid of Preston Smith last year. Linebacker's the same. Safety's the same. Cornerback, they might lose Alexander, but we don't know that yet for sure. Nate Hobbs was added, though, which is beautiful. I like Nate Hobbs a lot. So, again, personnel-wise, I think the Packers got better. Personnel-wise. I don't know if that means they're going to be better than last year, though, because their division is so tough. But I would argue they got a little bit better. The Commanders. Now, the Commanders are really interesting because I think from a offensive perspective, they got better on paper. I mean, Debo added to the wide receiver room for Zacchaeus, essentially. They brought back Ertz. They had the same running back room. Old man Eckler. Jaden Daniels is there. Mariota returned. They added Laramie Tunzel, and they added Connerly to the offensive line. Those are big-time additions. They kept Cliff Kingsbury, which is essential. Defensively, though, that's how disgusted I am with their defense. I think they got worse because they lost Jonathan Allen. They lost Dante Fowler. Their edge position is gross. I mean, I brought up the stat. Their edge position has less sacks than Trey Hendrickson last year combined. Okay? Combined. All right? That's horrible. Okay? Dietrich Wise and Jacob Martin were kind of their additions, and they lost a couple guys. Linebacker, they're the same. Bobby Wagner is 1,000 years old. Safety position, I think they got a little bit worse. losing Jeremy Chin. They added, what's his name from the Saints, I think. I can't remember, but they added somebody. Cornerback, they added Jonathan Jones. They also added Amos. So I think there's improvement at corner, which should improve their overall secondary and their coverage. But I'm very concerned about their pass rush and their defensive front. So I actually kind of think that this is a time will tell, because time will tell whether or not Connerly actually plays for them this year. Time will tell if Tunzel makes the difference that they're expecting. Time will tell if Debo is still actually good at football. And time will tell if the cornerback improvements offset the defensive line losses. And they still have time maybe to make a trade or do something for their defensive front, but I am not impressed there. The Cardinals got a lot better. I would actually put the Cardinals into a watch out category because I thought they did so much. I thought they did more than a lot of teams to improve one side of the football. Their offense is actually like exactly the same. I don't think they really did anything at all, not coaching wise, quarterback wise. They did sign Jacoby Brissett. Okay, there it is. They signed Jacoby Brissett, which is like a solid backup. Okay, fine. He's good in the room, stuff like that. But defensively, wow, they got a lot better for now and for later. So for now, they got Calais Campbell and they got Dalvin Tomlinson, two veteran good defensive tackles. Calais Campbell was literally the best run defender in football last year, which is amazing. He's a Hall of Famer. Walter Nolan was drafted in the first round. He's for the later, but he's also for the now. Okay, Robinson returns from injury. He was their first round pick last year, but that doesn't really count. Josh Sweat, that's a big one. Obviously, they're probably their leading sacker this year on the edge. Linebacker, I think they kind of stayed the same. They flipped out a couple different guys. They brought in Akeem Davis-Gaither, and they let go of Kaiser White. They also drafted somebody, I think. Cornerback, Will Johnson is going to really improve their secondary. I think if he's healthy, he's a legit CB1 in the NFL. Safety, they're already pretty darn good. So I think the Cardinals, just from what they did on defense alone, that catapulted them into a very interesting conversation. So I think the Cardinals had a watch out. This could be like an underrated, overlooked offseason. The Steelers, this kind of depends on what happens with Aaron Rodgers. Because right now, I can't say that going from Russell Wilson to Mason Rudolph is any way, shape, or form going to improve their team. Like they might have added DK Metcalf. They might have flopped, or flopped Caleb Johnson and Najee Harris. But ultimately, I mean, that does not matter if they don't have a quarterback. Defensively, they added Darius Slay. They added Juan Thornhill. They added the kid from Oregon in the first round, Derek Harmon. They added a couple pieces to their front seven in the draft as well. I think Black and Sawyer, was it? So, man, my mouse is so stupid. Like the Steelers, if they don't get a quarterback. So, I'm going to say that Aaron Rodgers signs, and if not, Kirk Cousins is their quarterback or something. We're just going to make something happen here. So, I mean, like, you can't say they got worse if that's the case. I think this is exactly a short-term improvement, but long-term, I mean, they really didn't do anything, which is interesting because, like, this could be a time will tell. Like, should they have just blown things up? Should they have pursued a quarterback? Should they, in the draft, I mean, like, should they have kind of went younger instead of signing guys like Darius Slay and putting a bunch of money into DK Metcalf? So they did get better, like, right now, but I think also at the same time, like, was this actually beneficial for their franchise? So I'm actually going to just stir the pot and put them in time will tell because of that. And also because Aaron Rodgers has not signed yet. The Buffalo Bills. Oh my goodness. The Buffalo Bills. Okay, so offensively, they're exactly the same, except for Mac Hollins is gone and Josh Palmer is in, and I'd say that's an improvement. And they added Elijah Moore, so I can't say that they got worse at wide receiver. If anything, they got better. Otherwise, offense is exactly the same as long as James Cook does not randomly ask for a trade. Defensively, I think they got a lot better. I mean, Maxwell Hairston in for Rasul Douglas. They also added back Tre'Davious White and Dane Jackson for depth. That is nice. And they flipped out the negative, basically, in former first-round pick Kaiir Elam. Safety, they got a little bit better, I guess, adding Forrest to the mix. Linebacker is exactly the same. Milano's just healthier. Defensive line, they added Ogunjobi, Hoyt, Boza in for Miller. They added Landon Jackson, and they added TJ Sanders. So they added a lot of pieces to the defensive front. I would argue that the Bills had a watch-out offseason because I think this could be the offseason that takes them from contender to Super Bowl champion. So that's why I'll put them in there. And honestly, they didn't get worse in literally any area. The Atlanta Falcons. Running back's the same. Quarterback, Penix. Wide receivers are the same. They didn't really improve that area. Pitts is staying on the team. Offensive line is slightly worse. They lost Drew Dahlman. Still a good O-line, though. Defensively, they obviously added 2 edge rushers in the first round. Both rookies in Walker and Pierce. We'll see how good either of them are. Safeties got better because of the 2 draft picks, Watts and Bishop. They re-signed Hughes. Linebacker, I think they lost somebody, but I don't think it was too substantial. Atlanta, they also added Leonard Floyd. I think defensively they definitely got better. Offensively, they're the same. I mean, I think they're kind of the same, to be honest. But, like, for now, I kind of think they're the same. I don't really think those rookies are really, truly going to change their team. But I do kind of think they also did take a step forward. So I'll put them in the step forward category. Seattle, okay. So Geno to Darnold, in my opinion, is sketchy. I think that might be a downgrade. Offensive line-wise, Gray Zabel really helps as their first-round pick. I wish they'd kind of did more in the draft in the offseason. They did lose Laken Tomlinson, if that's a loss at all. Tight end, they're the same. They might cut Noah Fant. Running back, they're better just from a depth perspective with Damian Martinez. Wide receiver, I think they got worse losing Metcalf and Lockett for Valdez-Scantling, Cooper Kupp, and did they draft somebody? They drafted somebody, but I don't think it was too substantial. But I would say they got worse there. I do think they got better at offensive coordinator with Kubiak, though, which might help their offensive line. I'm disgusted by their play calling last year, but, you know, it might offset their offensive line, help their offensive line, and offset the wide receiver losses. Defensively, they added DeMarcus Lawrence, but they lost Tremont Jones and Roy Robertson Harris, although neither of them were really impactful. Edge is the same, basically. Linebacker is the same, basically. Safety, they did add their second-round pick with the Freak Show. And then cornerback, I think, is still the same. They lost Trey Brown. This is tough, man. I think they're the same. I'm going to put them in the same because I think, like, they got better some places. They got worse some places. I don't know necessarily. I think long-term with Jalen Milroe, long-term with what they're going for on offense, it will be a bonus. It will be a plus. It will be a positive. But I think for the now, they probably are the same. The Patriots had a monumental offseason. I don't think there's any argument about that. The Patriots, first of all, totally drastically improved their coaching staff. It's not even a question. They went from Gerard Mayo to Mike Vrabel. They went from Van Pelt to McDaniels. They went from unknown offensive line coach to Doug Marrone. They added, just a bunch of coaches that are well-respected across the board on offense and defense. Offensive line-wise is actually probably one of the areas where they didn't improve like as drastically as some areas, but they got a lot better still. Will Campbell at left tackle. They still have V. Adrian Lowe on the roster. Left guard is still Cole Strange, I believe. Center is maybe a decline from Dave Andrews to Bradbury or the kid they drafted, Wilson, out of Georgia. Right guard is Onwenu. Right tackle is better with Morgan Moses. Their right tackle last year, I think 99% of humans could not even name who their right tackle was last year. Tight end is the same. They retained Hooper. Running back is better. They added Travion Henderson to Stevenson and Gibson. Wide receiver is drastically better, adding Kyle Williams and Stephon Diggs to everybody they already had last year, right? Then Drake May is a year older, which I'm not really including, but he should be better. Then defensively, you have Milton Williams adding for nobody, losing nobody. They added Tonga and they lost Godshaw, I guess. Who cares? Edge-wise, they added Landry. I don't know if they lost. I guess they lost Uche, but I mean, he didn't really play. And then they added the kid in the draft out of LSU, Swinson. So that's a little bit of an improvement too. Linebacker, you add Giddens, I believe. Is it Gibbons or Giddens from the Titans, who's an underrated linebacker, along with Spillane in for Bentley, essentially. So I would say that's an improvement because I think Spillane's better than Bentley, and Bentley is pretty good in my opinion. Cornerback, they got a lot better because they added Carlton Davis. They did lose Jonathan Jones, though, but I do think Jonathan Jones had the worst season of his career last year. Safety-wise, they added Marcus Epps, and they also added a 4th-round pick to that position as well. So, I mean, this is just a monumental improvement. Like, there's no question at all. If this team, like, made the playoffs, winning 10 or 11 games, no one would be surprised based on all the talent they were able to add in free agency. All the, like, marquee players, too, like Diggs, Davis, Campbell, Henderson, like, going down the list, Landry, Milton Williams, if I even said him yet. There's a lot of improvement right there. Mac Hollins I didn't include, but Mac Hollins is also on the team for vibes and no sandals. The Cleveland Browns. The Cleveland Browns have 5 quarterbacks, which means they have 0. They have Shador, who's not going to play. Dylan Gabriel, who might play a little bit. Kenny Pickett, who you desperately do not want to see play. Joe Flacco, who's really entertaining, but also not very good. But that being said, last year they played DTR, who might be the worst quarterback in the NFL, period. And Deshaun Watson, who might be the most disgusting human being in the NFL. So I would argue their quarterback position got better. Running back, Nick Chubb was hurt last year, so I can't really say they got worse. I mean, they did add 2 running backs in Sampson and then also Judkins in the draft. So I think they got better. Wide receiver, they lost Cooper last year, and they lost Elijah Moore, which sucks. I don't think they did anything at wide receiver in the draft. I think they got worse there. Tight end, they got better with Fannin, I would say. Offensive line, I'm kind of disappointed that they didn't do anything, but they're about the same. They're just old. Coaching-wise, they're the same. Defensively, they got better, I think. They added Schlesinger. They added Mason Graham. They swapped Dalvin Tomlinson for Malik Collins. Their secondary is essentially the same. Yeah, I mean, I think Cleveland, at the end of the day, is probably the same team. But that being said, Cleveland did a lot for the youth of this roster and the prospects of this roster, which means time will tell. Because if Dylan Gabriel is like the next Russell Wilson, then, I mean, they could be good. Same as Shador, right? At the same time, defensively, I do think like adding a guy like Mason Graham should drastically help their defense, you would think. Schlesinger is also a stud. But they lost JOK essentially too. So yeah, I mean, time will tell feels fair to me. We'll see what happens with the quarterback position. The Houston Texans. Defensively, they went from awesome to even more awesome. They just added depth, basically, like everywhere, like at every position. Safety, corner, linebacker, defensive line. They swapped out Fatu Kazi for Sheldon Rankins at defensive tackle. Their DN depth is like ludicrously stacked. They added Green from Chicago. They retained pretty much everybody they already had. Linebacker, they added EJ Speed, if I'm not mistaken. That is a really nice add for them. As a backup, by the way. They already had 3 playable linebackers. Safety, they added someone, but who did they add to safety? I can't remember, Texans fans. They added somebody. Corner, they added a draft pick, and they added Ronald Darby. They get back Jalen Petrie, not that that matters. That's not included. Wide receiver, they added 2 premier draft picks in Knoll and Higgins. Both are going to help them. Tank Dell injured. That hurts. But they added Christian Kirk in for Diggs, who got hurt last year. So Kirk, Diggs, Knoll. And they also added Braxton Berrios, who is a good punt returner. Justin Watson, who's a good depth receiver and a special teamer and a winner. Tight end, they're basically the same. Running back, they did add a pass catcher in the draft. Quarterback, I think they're the same. They did add the kid from Florida. I don't know if he'll make the team, though. Offensive line is really where it kind of comes down. I think defensively they got better. Wide receiver, they got deeper. I don't know if they got better, but they got deeper. Offensive line-wise, okay, so they lost Laramie Tunzel. They added Trent Brown and Cam Robinson and Ursery. So that's 3 for 1, essentially, I think. They lost Mason, or they cut Mason. I don't know if you'd say they lost him. They added Ingram. They lost Green. They added Tomlinson. So, I mean, I think their O-line is better. They also, I think the area where they got better too, and this is where things really could get interesting, is they went from Slowick to the new offensive coordinator, Nick Haley. Is it Nick Haley or Nick Haley? Either one. He was in New England. He's really good with offensive lines. I think he's going to improve their offense a lot from a pass protection and an offensive synchronicity standpoint. He's also from the Rams in New England. So I think that the Texans kind of had a watch out offseason in some ways, because I think they took their defense from dominant to maybe the best in the league. And I think they potentially did enough for their offensive line that they might have fixed a catastrophic area of their team, especially if the offensive coordinator is good enough. That being said, I'm kind of baking in a lot of things here. So I don't know if I can really say that they got a watch out. That might be a little bold. Time will tell might be more accurate. But step forward is also fair. Like, I mean, I feel like I could put them in any one of these 3 categories, to be honest. So you guys let me know in the comments what you guys think. I would say step forward is probably fair. I think that's probably the fairest category. The Chiefs. Okay, so they didn't really lose any coaching. Wide receiver-wise, they added Rashee Rice due to injury, but that doesn't really count. Tight end, did they sign somebody? I don't remember. Offensive line-wise, they added Simmons at left tackle. They also added Moore at left tackle. So I would say their offensive line, they did lose Joe Thuney. So their O-line is probably the same-ish. Running back, they got a little bit better. They added Elijah Mitchell. Pacheco's healthier, but again, that doesn't really count. They did lose at wide receiver Hardman and Watson. I'll throw that out there. Quarterback, they got better as a backup. I think Minshew is a better backup than Wentz. Defensively, they went youthful, but they did lose some pieces. Like, they lost Tershawn Wharton is the name that is really coming to mind. And I think they lost one more defensive tackle, if I'm not mistaken. But they added a couple pieces in the draft, right? To their D tackle and their edge position. So those should kind of offset their losses. They also added Jerry Tillery as well. Linebacker-wise, they're basically the same. Safety, I think they got worse because they lost Justin Reed. Cornerback, I think they got better. They added a 3rd-round pick, and they added Christian Fulton. So the Chiefs, I think, are kind of the same. I think that's probably fair. Yeah, I think that's probably fair. The same is probably fair. The Dallas Cowboys, okay. So they lost Brandon Cooks, but he didn't play the whole year last year. Wide receiver is really suspect. Running back, they lost Dowdle, and they added Blue and another kid in the draft, and they added Javonte Williams and Miles Sanders. So they added competition, but I don't know if any of them are any good. I'd probably say they stayed the same there. Tight end, they stayed the same. Quarterback, they obviously got Dak back, which is huge. Their offensive line, they added Booker, but they lost Martin. I don't think they lost anybody else. So I'd say they probably got a little worse on the offensive line. Defensively, I like what they did on the defensive line. I like the Fowler pickup, and I like the Ezeraku draft pick. So I think their pass rush got better. I think their run defense is suspect. Linebacker position, they lost Kendricks, but they added, a guy from Chicago. They added, who else they add? Sanborn, I think, and they might have added one more linebacker. I can't remember. Safety, nobody, I don't think. They didn't add. Corner, they got a little worse. They lost. Oh, no, they didn't really get, they probably got better. I mean, they added Revel. I actually think Revel will be better than Jordan Lewis, so I think they actually got better. I think the Cowboys got a little bit better, maybe. I mean, I'm not really trying to account for Dak Prescott, right? Like, Dak, obviously they're going to be better if Dak plays. So, also, McCarthy in for Schottenheimer. That's probably a downgrade, but they did it. I think Eberflus is a better coordinator at this point than Zimmer is. I'm going to say they got a little better. I like what they did on defense. So I'm going to say they got a little bit better. Wow, I might have to move some of these because I'm putting too many teams in this category. The Chargers. Offensive line got better with Becton. Running back got better, obviously, with Harris and Hampton. Wide receiver got better because they added Harris and Mike Williams. And I don't think they really lost anybody. Maybe they lost DJ Chark. Tight end, they added Conklin, which I think helps. They lost Stone Smart. Defensively, they lost Joey Bosa. That's a thing. They lost Poona Ford. That's a thing. They added the kid out of Oregon, but that's not going to equate to Poona Ford, in my opinion. So I think they also lost Morgan Fox, right? So I think their defensive front got worse. No argument there. Cornerback, I think they got worse because they lost Fulton, right? I don't know if I could say they got worse. They did add Jackson from the Steelers, Dante, and they added Sebastian, what's his name? St. Just. Safety, they're basically the same. What did they do on defense in the draft? They didn't really do much. They just picked some depth guys. I think their offense got better, a lot better. They got better on the O-line. They added Andre James to the center position too. So they got better at running back, wide receiver, offensive line. But they got worse on defense. At least in terms of personnel. That's difficult. I'm gonna say they kind of stayed the same, but time will tell is also fair too. I'm gonna say time will tell. Because I think I think they did enough to improve because their offense is a lot better on paper. So you could argue that they got a little bit better. But I'll say time will tell because their defense might regress. The Jets, they got worse. I mean, they just did. I mean, Justin Fields, I'm sorry. they just did. I mean, Membu helps right tackle. Tight end, Tyler Warren, but they did have Tyler Conklin before, right? Running back's the same. Wide receiver is worse. They lost Devontae Adams. Rodgers to Fields is drastic downfall, in my opinion. Defensive line, they didn't improve the defensive tackle position. Edge position is basically the same. Linebacker, they lost CJ Mosley, but he was kind of hurt and old last year. Safety position is kind of not good. Cornerback, they got worse. They lost DJ Reed. So, yeah, they definitely got worse. No question. Also, Aaron Glenn, I'm not a fan of. Offensive coordinator, I'm not a fan of. Honestly, you could say what the F, bro. Honestly, you could say what the F with this team. What are they even doing? I don't even know. Oh, no, they didn't add Tyler Warren. My bad, bro. They added a second-round tight end. They added Taylor's kid. That's my bad. Mason Taylor they added. So yeah, they definitely didn't get better at tight end. So I would say regression, at least for now, because tight ends usually take time to develop. So regression is fair, I think, for the Jets. I'm not going to say they got so much worse, because I think the coaching could be better, especially from late last year. But not. I don't know if Glenn's better than Saleh necessarily. Carolina got better, I think. T-Mac at wide receiver. Running back, they added Dowdle. They also added ETN. Offensive line is the same. Tight end is basically the same. So, yeah, offensively, definitely better. Defensively, definitely better. They added Bobby Brown, Tershawn Wharton, Patrick Jones, Roseboom, is it? A linebacker. They added 2 edge players in Scorton and Princely in the draft. They added safety Morig, and they also added Ohio State safety. So Carolina, I don't think they quite got to watch out, but I definitely think they stepped up for sure. I might have to change. Yeah, I'm definitely gonna have to change. There's too many teams here. The Tennessee Titans. I think you could argue that it was monumental just because they got Cam Ward. I mean, but the question is Cam Ward the type of prospect that kind of... I'm going to say watch out just because the coaching still sucks, at least offensively. I'm not a Callahan fan. The offensive line, I don't think Dan Moore was a good investment. Kevin Zeitler is a short-term investment, so it's not a huge deal. Wide receiver, they're basically the same. They're shit. Tyler Lockett, whatever. Running back's the same. Defensively, I think they might be worse. They lost Harold Landry. They traded Ernest Jones last year. This mouse is pissing me off. I think their defense, they did add an edge in round 2. Yeah, I mean, their defense might be a little worse. But I would say watch out just because they added Cam Ward. I mean, that's really it right there. Just because he could totally change the team. So, the Indianapolis Colts, what is this team doing? I don't know. They have Anthony Richardson and Daniel Jones. Like, it's a joke, okay? It's an absolute joke. Running back, they're a little bit better. Wide receiver, they added Khalil Herbert and they added a draft pick. Wide receiver, they're the same, I think. Tight end, they're a lot better. They added Warren. Offensive line, I would argue they're a lot worse. But those guys have been injured a little bit. Fries and the center, Kelly. But I would argue they could be a lot worse depending on their replacements. The center isn't bad. Defensively, they got healthier on the defensive line. I think Anarumo is an improvement over Bradley, so I'll give them that. I think that Charvarius Ward really helps their corner position, and Bynum could potentially be an upgrade over Blackman, but Blackman was good last year. Blackman, I don't even think has been signed yet. That's a guy to watch out for. They did lose speed at linebacker and didn't really replace him yet. I would say this team is a joke. Like, I'm just going to hate on the Colts, bro. Party's pissed off that I hated on their draft grade. I don't know what they're doing. Like, Anthony Richardson's awful. I can't do it with this team. Daniel Jones, Jacksonville. I mean, to be fair, like, the Colts are the same, to be honest, but, like, I'm going to put them in WTF just to piss Party off. Jacksonville is Liam Cohen really helps, I think. But Doug Peterson was a credible head coach. Offensive line-wise, they lost Mitch Morse and they replaced him with Hainsey. I think that's a downgrade. Guard-wise, Scherf is gone. Has he signed anywhere yet? That's an interesting one. And they replaced him with Makari. Honestly, I don't think that's better. Tight end, they got worse. Evan Ingram's gone. Wide receiver, they got a lot better because Travis Hunter's there. And De'Ami Brown, I like as well. They added 2 running backs for no reason at all. I like Tootin. Defensively, I don't know if Travis Hunter's going to play defense or not. Rainsaw is a corner/safety, I believe, is in Rainsaw. Corner safety prospect. That might help them, but their safety position is bad. Cornerback, they added Jordan Lewis. That should help a little bit, but they lost Ronald Darby. Defensive line, they stink on the D tackle position. Edge is the same. Linebacker, they added 2 draft picks for no reason. So I would argue that the Jags stayed the same. Like, I think from a talent perspective, they're actually worse, maybe? No, let's say time will tell. Because Liam Cohen is so good on offense, and Travis Hunter is Travis Hunter. So I'll say time will tell. Honestly, like, the rest of their team, though, probably got worse from a roster perspective. Now let's look at the step forward category and maybe organize it a bit better. I'm actually going to move Baltimore into watch out because I think Starks, Green, and Hopkins is enough for me to be like, was that enough to put them in the Super Bowl? So I'm going to put them there. The Bengals, I think step forward is probably fair. I think. Broncos, honestly, yeah, you can't really put them in any other category. The Vikings, I would say watch out, actually. I think watch out might be more fair because they really improved their offensive and defensive lines. Like, a lot. And if J.J. McCarthy is the same as Darnold, I mean, watch out. The Rams, I think they took a step forward, I don't think they did enough in the secondary. The Raiders, you know what? When you really think about it, I think the Raiders had a monumental offseason. I don't know why I only put them in step forward. They got a franchise running back, franchise player. They got a quarterback. They got Pete Carroll and Chip Kelly. They got a GM that knows what he's doing. They had a good draft class. I mean, they're not going to be a great team this year. Don't get this twisted. But they might have turned their franchise around. So I'm going to put that there. Packers, I'm fair with that. Falcons, yeah, I guess. I mean, but honestly, them trading a first-round pick next year only hurts them too. So, you might have to put them here. That might be more fair, actually. Just because of that trade is so stupid. The Texans, yes. Cowboys, yes. The Panthers, yes. That is the list. That is the confirmation, the confirmed list of improved, not improved, and everything in between. Thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed, Gronk spike the like button, and please, I beg you, don't be a jabroni. Subscribe, homies. Peace.